Good afternoon, Howard Parent Connect. Thank you for watching this recording or jumping in the live feed to through our Zoom page to talk a little bit about this really important topic. Um, we are really excited to have Domonique Green back to share with us some of her thoughts and reflection regarding her experience with imposter syndrome. And so I will not spend too much time doing introductions, but I do want to start off by uh, thanking you guys for being patient, parents, because I know that we wanted to make sure that we brought a live session on our platform every month to you. Because I'm not tech savvy, we've been having some challenges trying to get live feeds when we're doing interviews with people. Me going live is easier because it's just me, but when I'm trying to bring someone in, it's a little harder. So please be patient. So again, this session today is talking about imposter syndrome and mental health as it relates to your young Bison, or maybe you have a family member or yourself who's challenged with that. So, just to start off with a quick definition of imposter syndrome, it is this idea that your success in life is only due to luck, right? To by accident or circumstances or someone else's like mistake, right? And not quite due to your own skills and your own qualifications and your own talent or hard work. And so Dominique and I were talking a little bit about this last year, and she was expressing how she experienced that in her own time at Howard University. And so I thought she would be the perfect person to come here. When we was doing a little bit of research about imposter syndrome, we saw that the idea around imposter syndrome kind of came to a head like in the late 70s. Some research scientists was like really doing some assessment of women in the workplace. And when they did the assessment, they came back defining imposter syndrome specifically as a woman's issue. And so because of that, a lot of the focus was on women. And then as research progressed, they realized that this issue was not just a woman's issue, that, it crosses genders, but it definitely is more prevalent in spaces of ethnic minorities, people with disabilities, people who are in spaces where they are not represented. That happens, it shows up more in those spaces. So just to give you a little bit of an understanding about imposter syndrome. So with that, Domonique Green is a graduate from the Chadwick Boseman School of Fine Arts at Howard University, graduating last year, class of 2021. And since then, she is the founder and a creative director for DomG, Creative Agency LLC, and she also works with the University of Minnesota Boynton Health as their communications manager. She currently lives in Chicago, Illinois, where she is active in her community and a member of Iota Phi Lambda Sorority Incorporated. I want to make sure I got that right. And so she is gracious enough to give us her time today. She is talking to us from Washington, D.C. She actually traveled back to D.C. To spend some time with her fellow graduates, alumna, and bringing in a new line for Iota Phi Lambda. So she is taking out some time to talk to us today. So I'm going to turn it over to Domonique, and so she can kind of talk a little bit about, her thinking around imposter syndrome and how she come to realize that that was something that she was dealing with.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for having me again. Happy to be back. Yeah, my experience with imposter syndrome, it started earlier than I realized. I think once I graduated from Howard, I was able to reflect and really think about my experience and realize it really started once I got the acceptance letter. um, in high school and during my senior year, I was very, very nervous when applying to colleges, which resulted in me applying to about 30 different universities. My college or my high school counselor at the time would call me into the office all the time, like, Domonique, you've applied to another school. Like, they're asking for information from me again. You don't need to keep applying for schools. But at the time, I felt like I needed to, as a backup plan, I needed a backup for my backup for my backup for my backup because I just was not sure that I would get into any school. And there wasn't really any justification behind it because I graduated high school with a 3.75 GPA. I was a part of the theater department on both the acting and technical side. I was a part of our criminal justice club where I competed on state and local levels with my organization. And I was also a part of the dance club, even though I can't dance. So I was pretty active in high school. I had a lot of good things going on for myself during that time, but I still felt like there was going to be a struggle when it was time to get into college. So I committed to the first school that accepted me, which was Texas A&M University Corpus Christi. And I, accepted the offer. I got my dorm. I started like looking at courses. I was ready to go. And after I accepted that offer, I started getting offers back to back to back from all of the 30 plus universities that I applied for. Essentially, I got into all the schools that I applied for, and I was kind of mind blown by it. But at the time, I was still like, yeah, I'm going to Texas A&M Corpus Christi. Like, that's what I'm committed to, and I'm comfortable with that. But January came with my senior year at high school, and I got an email from Howard saying that I was accepted. And I looked at it for a really long time because I was confused. I was like, I don't understand. Like, how did I get here? What do you mean this acceptance? They sent this to the wrong person. Like, I don't think that they meant to send this to me, but I'm also not going to complain about it. I'm gonna just take that luck and keep it pushing. And it wasn't luck. Like I said before, I was very active in high school, had a high GPA, had very good grades. So that was the reason why I got into Howard. But at the time, whenever someone would ask me about it, I'd be like, yeah, I don't know how I got in. Like, I think they accidentally sent it to me, but they couldn't take it back. So here I am. Never stepped foot on Howard's campus a day in my life. I was in DC a lot prior to starting college, just from field trips growing up in Pennsylvania. But I never actually been a part of that community, never seen what it was like there until freshman move-in day. That was my first time being on campus and seeing the dorms and things like that. But I felt good. Like, when I got there, I was really excited. I was excited to start my journey. I was excited to be around a whole bunch of Black people. And I just knew that it was going to be one of the best experiences that I had. Growing up, I was a part of like different excelling groups, especially through elementary school and middle school, advanced reading programs I was put in to the point where they would pull me out of class, to sit with 3 other students who are also high level readers to start a book club, or being taken out of class to participate in a really cool computer course because I was very advanced with learning different programs and technology. So just throughout K through 12, I always felt like I was performing above average because they always put me in situations where I was told that I was performing above average. Getting into high school, I did a lot of design work, and everybody always asked me for things, t-shirt designs, flyers, all these cool things and creative things. I was always a go-to person. Once I got to Howard and I really kind of got settled in after like the second, everybody had that same experience. Everybody here was advanced in something in school. Everybody, had really good grades, had a high GPA, graduating high school, and we weren't special anymore, and it was a good thing, but we're not special anymore. We're in a space where we're surrounded by a lot of Black students from different parts of the world who are just as smart and successful as we are. The difference was that I went to a public high school in Houston, Texas. But there were students who were going to some of the top performing high schools in the country, graduating valedictorians, salutatorians, 4.0 GPAs, sometimes over 4.0s, perfect ACT scores, high SAT scores, a plethora of AP credits, and some of the kids even had internships during their senior year of high school. And I didn't even know that you could do something like that. So being around all of that and seeing how successful a lot of the students were prior to stepping foot on campus made me question a lot of things about me and if I fit in here. So my freshman year at Howard, I joined so many different clubs and organizations to be a part of their e-board, to juice my resume up so that I could fit, so that I could be performing just as well as the other students who were involved in everything. I was a part of Alternative Spring Break. I was a part of the Green Club. I was a part of Net Impact, which had something to do with internet safety. I had no knowledge about anything related to internet safety, but I was just joining clubs that were accepting people. The Pennsylvania Club, it was just so many different clubs or organizations that I was a part of, just to say that I'm a part of something, just to prove that like I can do things. I can be in school and be on an e-board for 10 different organizations and be successful at it and still have a social life. That's kind of what I was trying to present myself as, because that's what all the other kids were doing there. And over time, it got a little bit more difficult because being in a fine arts program, I didn't have any prior art experience through education. So high school, I never took an art class. Middle school, elementary. I think the only time I took an art class may have been like first, second, third grade, when it's kind of like a mandatory thing to have. But outside of that, I never took an art class. So when I was in my courses for my major and people are presenting their projects in front of the class and their works of art, literal bodies of art, one of like the most amazing pieces I've ever seen, I would look down at my project like, oh, I don't know, like if I want to present this, because in fine arts, you present your project, but you do critiques, you get feedback from not only your professor, but your classmates. And I was very, very nervous to do that. And once I realized that's kind of how the courses would go, I got like a lot of anxiety around that, to the point where on presentation days, I wouldn't show up to class. I text my professor prior to it, and I'm grateful I had that relationship with my professors and my advisors where I felt comfortable enough to just text them and be truthful, like, hey, I don't feel comfortable coming into class today to present. Can I come after class to your office hours and just show it to you then? Because I felt like it wasn't good enough. I felt like if I presented in the midst of everyone else, mine would be looked at as the worst project, or a project that's not as good as everyone else. And then it got to a point where I didn't want to come to class when we were working on projects, because I didn't want people to see what I was working on. I didn't want people to see the unfinished project and then create their own narratives about my work. And it got very, very, very difficult for me to just be present, because I always second guess myself. I always questioned it. I always questioned the value of my work, if it was quality or not, if this was a career that I could even go into and be successful in. Lots and lots and lots of questions I ran through my head. So by sophomore year, I developed like a really solid friend group, and we hung out all the time. Every single night we were in the study lounges, not studying, like playing card games, having a good time, but we were always together. And someone in my friend group was like, hey, like, do y'all ever feel like y'all are out of place here? And that sparked the conversation. And that was the first time that I realized that other people were feeling the same way that I was feeling. And it wasn't just me. It wasn't something that I was going through alone, but we still didn't know what it was. We just knew that we were feeling this way. We don't know why we're feeling this way, but we know we have to kind of ignore it so we can graduate. Got all this money in for tuition, like we got to make it to the end. We can't quit now. So it did relieve a lot of pressure. But sophomore year / junior year is also the time that students start pursuing selective organizations, whether that's Greek-led organizations or service organizations. A lot of the groups on campus are selective, meaning you have to put in an application, you have to submit transcripts, grades, schedules, resumes, letters of interest, and things of that nature. And that's when I noticed that a lot of my classmates were really starting to have high anxiety and just were very, very stressed out. Because with selective organizations, you can only select a certain amount of students or accept a certain amount of students, and there's thousands of students on Howard's campus. So it's very competitive, and students were feeling like they weren't worthy enough because they weren't being selected by their peers to be a part of their groups or to be a part of their organizations. And it was really difficult to see my friends going through that personally. It didn't affect me too much. It didn't really put too much weight on me, but it definitely affected the people around me. Then I think it was my junior, and towards the end of junior year, I started learning about imposter syndrome. I started seeing the term used a lot on campus, and I kind of just did my own research, and I was like, oh yeah, like that's what I'm dealing with. Like, that's what this is. I don't know how to manage it, but at least I know what it is now. At least I know what I'm dealing with. And I feel like I'm making a little bit of progress towards sanity, to say the least.
Did
But it
you,
was,
while you're talking, before you get to your next point, I had a quick question. We were doing some, you and I both were kind of going back and doing some research and looking at, what other scientists and researchers were saying about imposter syndrome. One of the things that they mentioned was that the imposter syndrome manifests in a few ways. And some people would say it was because of the way they were raised, and others would say because of the society, how they were exposed to society and society's norms, and how society perceives you as a female, as a Black female. Do you think that any one of those things may have impacted that?
I think both. I think how I was raised impacted, but not in a negative way. Because family was always in my corner. So I always had my family rooting for me. There was never a point in time where I felt discouraged. So growing up, always having a large group of people in your corner, like it really makes you feel like you can accomplish anything and you can do anything, regardless of, what the end piece project may look like. Having those people there advocating for you definitely helps out a lot. Society, yes, in a negative way. I think as Black women in general, we are always told that we just have to be persistent and persevere and, work super, super, super hard so that you can, be successful and all these things. And you have to sacrifice all these things that you want in life so that, you can be successful. So I think society definitely plays a large part in it because there's never a point in time where it's said that taking a break is okay or not working as hard this week is okay. Like it's okay to, relax and take time to decompress, or sometimes it's okay to quit too, like depending on, what the situation is. But we don't get that encouragement from society. We're just always told to kind of just work. You don't have a social life, do everything that you possibly can to be successful. And then once you're in that successful position, maybe, you can do the things that you desire to do. Maybe you can get married. Maybe you can start a family. Maybe you can travel. But the core focus of everything when it comes to Black women is work hard. And if you're not working hard, you're just seen as lazy or incompetent and things like that.
And that's interesting that you mentioned like no one ever says or share comfort around or normalize the conversation around even quitting, like just stopping doing, like when it's almost like, you're afraid to tell people that you're going to quit something because society has, or your surroundings have seen you as such a go-getter. Do it, do it, do it. You're resilient. You can, you're a fighter. And the idea of quitting is never really a normalized conversation. And I remember a book that I read by Seth Gordon called The Dip. And it really talks about like, when to move forward and when to quit, and that it's okay. And it talks about this space in between called the dip, where that's where you start making those decisions to either swing back upward or just, quit. And, I think that's significant to start having those conversations with our young people, because I think that also triggers anxiety and depression, because you feel like you can't quit, that you're going to let people down. And then that adds to your already, the already existing issues of the imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And even just touching back on, quitting things or stopping things, that's something I had to do my junior year. That was the same year I pursued my Greek letter organization. I go to Phi Lambda Sorority Incorporated, but that was also the same time where I was looking back at the other organizations that I had been a part of since freshman year, and I was like, I don't align with these groups. I don't really there's nothing that these groups are doing that aligns with my goals. And I had to quit a lot of those organizations. I had to drop from the executive board and give up my positions because one, it was just becoming too overwhelming trying to juggle all of those things. And two, it was realizing that I only really joined these other organizations so that people could see that I was active or that I was doing something, but not because I actually wanted to be a part of it. And that was difficult because, still to this day, a lot of my peers from Howard look at me and they're just like, oh yeah, it's Dom. Like Dom's always doing multiple things. Like she's always in this, she's always in that. Like she's working here, working there, and just super successful. So at that time when I had to quit those things, it was very difficult for me to do it because I knew that it could have been looked at as, oh, like she can't handle it anymore, or she can't perform at her best anymore. Like it's pretty much a wrap type thing. So that was pretty difficult, but I will say because I have the friends that I had, it wasn't too bad. It was essentially pretty smooth, transitioning out of those roles and just reverting my focus back to school. But it was difficult. Yeah, doing that is really hard.
So do you think, when people have identified that imposter syndrome is an issue, like they're really struggling with that, oftentimes there's like this comorbidity that's happening. So if you're identifying yourself as struggling with imposter syndrome, the chances are you're also dealing with things like depression and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if that's something that you were realizing that you were experiencing, and if you can share, your reflection on like your diagnoses of ADHD and how that played into it all as well.
Yeah, depression is something that definitely affected me at Howard. And part of me feels like I was dealing with it a majority of the time there, but I didn't really realize it until junior year or early into junior year. Um, I when everyone was applying for selective organizations and I was as well, it was difficult because especially if you have family who are already in those organizations, like you want to do it too. You want to be like, yeah, like I'm doing this too because you kind of inspire me to do it. And to try for those things and then not get it, it's hard, not because you didn't get in, but it's hard to go back to the people that inspires you to even try for those things and tell them that it didn't work out. That's a very difficult thing for people to do, for students to do, especially if they've been performing at their best. Like, regardless of all the organizations I was a part of at Howard, my grades were always up to par. I was on like dean's list multiple times. I had lots and lots of internships once I started Howard. There wasn't a year that went by where I didn't have at least 2 internships that year. So I was very well rounded, and to get to that point where it's like, dang, like I can't do this one thing that I really, really want to do, but like I've done everything necessary. You know, I did the volunteering, I did the, you know, internships, I did the on-campus work. My grades are amazing. People have great reviews and reflections on me, and you know, you still can't get and achieve that goal that you really wanted to. So that's a hard thing to have to swallow. That's it's really, really difficult to push past that. Fortunately, it wasn't too difficult for me to push past it, but I know for other students, some people left. Some people didn't come back. A lot of my friends like either transferred afterwards or just simply dropped out because of, you know, all the things leading up to that happened, and that's kind of like the tipping point for them. So yes, that
Would you say that those friends also was kind of struggling with imposter syndrome?
I think 90% of the campus struggles with it. It's just that a lot of people don't realize it, and they don't know that that's what they're dealing with. A lot of people who deal with imposter syndrome but don't realize it think that they're just lazy. That's like the term that's always thrown around, like, oh, or procrastination. And procrastination is a direct result of imposter syndrome, because when you feel like you can't accomplish something or you can't perform to the best of your abilities, you continuously push back doing that thing. And it's not because you don't want to do it. You really, really want to do this thing, but your thought process and all this negative energy is forcing you to not do it. Like, you physically cannot complete these tasks. And it just forces you just push it back, and you push it back, and you push it back until it's at the point where you can't push it back anymore, and now you're doing things last minute. You know, it could be a project, an assignment that you got assigned a month ago and it's due in 6 hours, and now you're sitting here rushing through it, and when you complete it and you turn it in, you know that you didn't put your best effort in. You know that it's not the quality that you wanted it to be because of how many times you kept pushing it back. But sometimes you also produce your best work. So it's like, it's kind of iffy with it. You know, sometimes you'll submit something last minute and, you know, it's not your best quality and it shows that it's not your best quality of work. But sometimes because you have so much pressure on your back to get something done, it ends up being the best quality. And when you get the feedback from your professor saying, oh, like, Domonique, this is such a great project. Oh, we love this. We would love you to present this. You're just like sitting there like, are you sure? And even though you're getting that quality feedback from your professor, the thought that pops up is still, I'm just lucky. That was a lucky, you know, chance for me. So it's like, it's really weird. It's really, really weird to deal with. And it definitely varies person to person. I believe that everyone has their own experiences with imposter syndrome, experience with anxiety, procrastination, and depression, but it kind of all boils down like to the same point. And with ADHD, that's something new for me that I'm dealing with. When I started my full-time job at the University of Minnesota, I work at the Boynton Health facility, which is a very large, I call it a hospital, but it's just a really big clinic with multiple services, from dental care, primary care, gynecologists, gender care. Literally any clinic is inside this building. And in order for me to start there, I had to show proof of vaccinations that I had, like showing proof that I had chickenpox and showing proof that I had like flu immunizations and things like that. So when I pulled up my medical records, I was going back as far as possible so I could find like the proof of vaccinations. And at the top of the list, it said ADHD with hyperdeficiency diagnosed at like 5 or 6 years old. And nobody was aware of this. Nobody in the family's aware of this. I'm not aware of this. We're all confused. Like, we've never seen this before. What do you mean? And this was back in July. So it's still very fresh for me. But I do feel like knowing that now, it definitely played a heavy role because you have imposter syndrome. You're not feeling like you're up to par or that you're good enough. Then with that, it brings anxiety because you're just like overthinking everything, and it's making you really stressed out, which causes you to procrastinate. And then once you get to that point of your procrastination where you can't procrastinate anymore, you really have to buckle down and do the work. Now it's ADHD kicking in because I can't focus. I'm like, okay, I have to complete this project and I'm working on it. I'm like, oh, wait, but there's that other thing that I have to do as well. So let me pause this to go do that because that's important too. Halfway through that, oh, dang, I was supposed to submit that yesterday. Let me go and work on this other thing real quick because that was due yesterday. It's just like your brain is on turbo speed, dealing with all these things at once. And a lot of people don't understand that imposter syndrome is a combination of these things. It's a combination of like depression. It's a combination of anxiety, procrastination, and then in my case, ADHD. And that's when I realized I couldn't do it on my own. I was like, I cannot fix this on my own. There's no possible way. I have no clue what's going on. I don't know how to manage this. So I started therapy, and I was able to like select a therapist who specialized in those areas. I was also able to select a Black female as my therapist so that I could feel comfortable in that conversation. And I've been doing it for about a month now. Once a week, I have a therapy session, and it's been super, super helpful. I'm definitely not going to say that I don't deal with imposter syndrome anymore because of it. It's something that's still there, and I think it takes a lot of work to move past it. But the conversation I have with my therapist and the tips and resources that she offers me and the feedback that she gives me really, really helps me find ways to deal with it on my own. And sometimes she's like, Dominique, you're wrong in that situation. Like, you shouldn't have done that. And I'm like, I guess you're right. But it's helpful to be in that space where it's like, okay, you're right about this, but this one you might want to work on that a little bit, and we could work on that by doing XYZ. It's almost like having someone catered to work on your brain, it's like a neurosurgeon, but without doing surgery, just through conversation. But yeah, that's pretty much what's been helping me a lot, in getting through everything.
So for the professors and the professionals on campus, like, what do you think? Do you think that they recognize that this is something that the students on campus may be challenged with? And if not, what would be your recommendation to bring that to their attention?
So the College of Fine Arts is really, really unique. I think it is the only college on Howard's campus where I never heard students truly complain about their professors and their professors being like insensitive and things like that. The professor that I've dealt with in the College of Fine Arts, the advisor that I have, they were very well aware of these things because they are emotionally connected to the students there. And they actually care. Like, I remember there was a time where I was sick and I texted my professor. It was like, hey, I can't come in today. I'm not feeling well. And he ordered me like this big thing of chicken noodle soup and sent it to my dorm, just to make sure that I was eating, because he knows like I'm one of those people who forget to eat. Like, that's just a thing. So he's like, yeah, I know you probably haven't eaten yet, so I'm going to send you this Postmates order. A lot of professors won't do that. A lot of professors be like, oh, well, if you're sick, you're going to have to come and make that time up. You're going to have to come into my office hours to do X, Y, Z. But they really care. Like, it didn't really feel like it didn't feel like hierarchy there. It felt like everybody was on the same level, and almost like working in a team setting. For other colleges, students struggle a lot, and I don't think those professors recognize it. I don't think that they actually pay enough attention to their students outside of their academic performance. Um, when it comes to, like, their mental health in general, I've seen so many complaints, and not just because it's Howard, just across the board. I have, like, friends at other HBCUs who deal with the same things and their courses, but none of them are fine arts. I'm the only friend that studied fine arts, and I'm the only one who's had such a great relationship, with my professors and my advisors. And you asked, what advice would I give to the professors?
What advice or what would you suggest happen so that the professors are more aware that there are so many students across the disciplines that's struggling with imposter syndrome that could be playing into their ability to show up and be active and productive in the classroom?
I think taking the time out to just have a conversation with the students. Um, I know I took a painting class, and we'd be working on our paintings, and I'm the worst painter ever. That's not my area, but I'm painting and I'm making my canvas, and as we're painting, our professor, he's in the center of the room and he's painting, his canvas as well. But as we're working, we're having a conversation about things that are going on around us, things that are going on in our community, how we're feeling about it. For instance, I know when Trump was in office, we're in DC, so that was kind of really difficult for us during that time. And my professor was having an open conversation about that, really trying to understand how we all felt, if we were comfortable, in the city, how being in the same city as a leader, with a leader like that, how that makes us feel and how that impacts our health. Um, Everything with, like, the Black Lives Matter movement and all the protesting that was going on, and really having true in-depth conversations about it. But there was also times where, like, students would just show up, like, it wouldn't even be their class period. They would just show up to talk to the professor, just to vent. There was a student who her art project got rejected from the gallery collection, and she had an amazing piece, and she just came in and she was bawling and just, like, so upset. And he pulled her to the side and had a conversation with her about it, and just reassured her that her work was quality, and don't let someone else's opinion of your work dictate how you feel about yourself. So if professors took that time, and I understand, like, math classes, science class, they're all lecture based, but it takes nothing, to take your students to make sure that they're feeling heard, whether it's in the classroom or in the community or at their internship, like, whatever it is, just checking in and just making sure everyone's okay, because students don't get checked on. Nobody really asks us how we're doing. We get asked, what's your plans after college? Or what internship are you going to have this summer? Or what organizations are you joining? Those are the questions that are always asked of us by family, friends, and peers, but nobody ever says, like, hey, like, are you okay? How's your experience going? Do you feel like you're stable mentally? Is there anything that you need? Nobody asks us that. So I think if professors took that time out to really build those connections with their students, there would be less students on Howard's campus that would feel the same way I felt, throughout my 4 years, or that felt like they couldn't go to anybody, and to just have those simple and open conversations.
I noticed that in your conversation, like, you were mentioning a lot about your friends who struggled with imposter syndrome, some of which end up leaving campus, or, dropping out of student organizations, or just kind of going into a silo. One of the statements that I read in this podcast, or listened to in this podcast called the Unity podcast, Looking Up, they were saying that women are somewhat more likely to blame their ability when they fail, and that men are more likely to attribute their mistakes to external factors beyond themselves. How might this tendency affect feeling like an imposter?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's what imposter syndrome is. It's blaming things on yourself and like putting a lot of weight on yourself. Um, I know that from like a guy point of view, that is something that happens a lot where, you know, they'll just say other things as the cause.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that's why men may deal with imposter syndrome less than women,
Mm-hmm.
because they're not thinking about themselves as a problem. They're thinking about literally anything else around them. They could be thinking about the pillowcases on the bed being the reason why they can't be successful at work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's, I don't know, that's a tough one. That's
Mm-hmm.
a tough question.
Yeah, I found that to be an interesting statement. Not that men and males on campus are not dealing with stress and anxiety and depression and ADHD and all of those things, and possibly even imposter syndrome. But when we look back on the original research around imposter syndrome, they were really focused on females and how females were the ones most likely to be
Mhm.
struggling with that. So fast forward, realizing that that wasn't a female issue, that this was happening across all genders, and all identifiers, that to read then that men blame their challenges on everything that's outside of them. You know, maybe they blame their challenges on their relationship, blame their challenges on their professors, blame their challenges on their pillowcase, you know, whatever that thing is. But they don't tend to say, I'm broken. Something's
Yeah.
not right with me inside. And this is why I am not able to do this thing. And that's not that, you know, I don't want to generalize it across all males, but this was a statement that came up and I was interested in hearing what your perspective was.
Yeah, I think that like just from a society perspective, men are in some situations, uh they're given a lot of excuses. Now, I know like we have the whole conversation on men and mental health, which is completely separate from this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but in general, if just looking in the workplace, you know, if a man does something in the workplace that's not accepted, typically like supervisors and bosses, like they'll give them an excuse, like, oh, it's because this or it's because of that. But women, if we do something, if we make a mistake, you know, we don't have a cushion.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing for us to fall back on. It all just piles up on us. So it's weird. Um, it's definitely a weird situation, because I feel like if someone, no matter who you are, if you're a male or a female or just identify as something else, if a situation arises and you are a part of the problem, like you, that it should be addressed that way. But if the situation arises and it's caused by other things, and it should be addressed that way. But we shouldn't uh decide how we deal with something based on if it's a male or a female. Yeah.
So you mentioned work. And so I'm thinking, how has imposter syndrome shown up in your work? How has it affected, you know, your career?
Yeah. I work in an all black department at my job. We're the only black department throughout the entire hospital. And it would, imposter syndrome definitely would affect me if I wasn't working with alongside other black people. If I was there by myself as like the only black person, it would have affected me a lot, because there's a lot of feedback that is given to myself and to my department by other people
Mm-hmm.
that isn't given to other groups of people. And that's something that I didn't catch on to initially. Initially, I felt like, oh man, like I must not be performing like well, like I must not be doing my job right if people are upset about this one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But after talking to my supervisor, like he reassured me, he was like, "You're not the problem." He was like, "There's nothing that you've done is wrong. This is just how they treat us." Um, and to not really think about it because what they're saying does not matter.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if I didn't have him, it would be a very, very difficult job to work with because there are there's a lot of things I could talk about. There's a lot of experiences that have risen at my job that would definitely show, the bias that happens. Um, but what I always come back to is at the end of the day, when I went through that extensive interview process and then they flew me out there to do an in-person presentation, they all unanimously agreed that I had the skill set and the experience and the quality of work to perform this role.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't deny that.
Mm-hmm.
They can't deny that they were excited to have me on board and that they really proved that they needed me in this role specifically. So when there's situations that arise where I start feeling like, dang, like, are they saying this because like I'm just not good enough? And I think back, I'm like, no, they all unanimously agreed that I was good enough. So that's not the reason. Like, that's not the situation. That's kind of how I navigated at work. It's a little bit easier navigating at my job, but only because of the support system that's there.
That's a good attitude to have because sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's hard in those spaces, and that you're kind of figured out a way to kind of process through them or through that situation at that in your work environment. So
Mm-hmm.
so we know that when we talk about imposter syndrome, like we try to educate young people about like not like looking at imposter syndrome as their whole self. Like it's a part of an experience that they're having, but it's not their full makeup, right? It's not all of them. And so one of the questions I have for you is hearing that imposter voice in your ear. If you had to name that voice, what would you name that voice?
Like an actual name.
Yeah, like what name? How what would you name that voice?
There's probably two that I could go with. One, it would be Karen. Somebody that's just complaining all the time. I would definitely go with that or something like a Bertha, like something really just like aggressive type of name.
Right.
Um, because it's definitely not me. Like I feel like when I'm dealing with it, I don't hear myself in it. Like it always feels like it's something that's coming from outside.
Mhm.
So yeah, Karen or Bertha would either be somebody who complains all the time or someone who's just super, super aggressive for no reason.
Right. That's good to know. So every time it comes up, you'd be like, Bertha, take a nap.
Yeah,
We're not
like
dealing with that right now.
chill out, go to sleep. It's not time for this right now.
So you did mention that you one of the strategies that you have in place to help you deal with your own imposter syndrome and all of the other things that are happening in your life, going to your therapist has been really helpful. What are some of the questions that your therapist shared with you to help you filter through when you hear Bertha or Karen in your ear telling you that you're not good enough?
Yeah, it's so funny because like my very first therapy session, she's like, okay, I'm gonna send you a worksheet after this and just, complete it before our next session so we could talk about it. And I was like, okay. And I'm thinking it's gonna be like this detailed, extensive assignment, like it's a class or something. So of course, I procrastinated on it. And I didn't complete it until like an hour before the next session started. But when I opened the form, it was very simple questions. It was questions basically that you would ask yourself when you're dealing with those thoughts to help you navigate it. And I don't remember all the questions, but I know one of them was like, the do you have proof or evidence that what you're thinking, that's a real thing, like, do you have proof that that's going to happen? So, like, for example, I would tell her, when I work on my clients, sometimes on design projects, I'll send the design sample out, and when they respond to the email, I would be so scared to open the email because I don't know what's in it, and I wouldn't be sure like if they liked it or not. So I wouldn't open it for like 2 days. Like, I would just wait. Let me gather myself, and then I'm gonna open it. So when I get an email now, I'm like, okay, do I have any proof or evidence that when I open this email, it's going to be something negative? And I'm like, no, because I've never opened the email and it's been something negative. So why do I have this thought? So like that question pops in my head automatically. I know the other one was, is this going to matter in 3 months? And I'd be like, no, it's not going to matter in 3 months because this is a situation that lasts 30 seconds. Like, it's not that big a deal, so it doesn't last that long. So it's questions like that. I wish I had the full list of questions on hand, but those are two of the questions that were on there, and those are the two that I consistently ask myself every day. And then outside of that, because I'm a very, very visual person, when I have those thoughts, as soon as it comes in, I imagine like this metal roof going over my brain and like bouncing like the ideas back out. Like, no, like that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. So every time I have any sort of negative thought in regards to like work that I'm doing or just in general, I'm like, oh, here comes this thought. Let me put this metal roof over my head so it can block it out. I ain't gonna think about it. So yeah, those are two things that help me a lot. It helps me a lot because I'm very visual, so it may be different for other people, but that's something that I practice like on a daily basis.
I almost forgot to unmute. And what advice would you give parents who have sent their Bison away, to school, or any parent who sent their emerging scholar away from school and just don't know that this thing is happening, but having conversations with their kid who's like, I think I want to drop out. I don't want to be a part of this organization anymore. This is not working. I hate this class. What, because it could be that they're experiencing this imposter syndrome. What advice would you give parents to help them support their student and recognize those signs early?
Yeah, I think that if a parent has a student who is considering dropping courses or leaving organizations, or they just feel lost, one thing you don't want to do is start the conversation with, no, you can't do that. Mm-hmm. Because 9 times out of 10, the decision's already made. Like, it's already set in stone in their head. But what you can do is just ask questions about it. Ask, okay, like, why do you feel this way? Do you think that leaving this or stopping this is going to help you? Is it going to make you, more stable mentally? Is it going to make you more comfortable on campus? So like, I think it's really important for parents to ask questions and really try to understand what's happening versus making your own assumption about why. Because a lot of parents will just say, oh no, you're just being lazy. And that's not the case. That's just not the case. There's so many other things that could be contributing to those decisions. And I know, some people may be a little hurt by this one, but you can't pressure your kids to do any Greek organization. You can't. But I know that I have friends whose parents and cousins and uncles, they're a part of these organizations, and it's like a history within their families. Putting that pressure on them, it's a lot of stress, especially at Howard. And it creates a lot of anxiety. And a lot of times that can be the tipping point for imposter syndrome. Like I said earlier, it's really, really hard to go back to the people who have been pushing you and, encouraging you to do something, and then you're not able to accomplish it. That's very difficult to deal with. And no matter how the parent responds to it, even if it's like, oh, it's okay, you can try again next time, it can make them feel like they aren't worthy enough. So I think it's a beautiful thing to have students pursue Greek organizations. I love Greek life. I think it's one of the best things that students can participate in when they're in college, but allow them to make the decision on their own. Allow them to explore the many different options out there, because it may not be something that they're able to do right now. There might be another organization that more aligns with what they're trying to do right now, then they could do that one later. But definitely, and even outside of Greek organizations, like any sort of selective organization on Howard's campus, because I know a lot of Howard parents who are also alumni, you know, they're a part of different selective organizations on the campus, and they'll try to get their students to pursue those as well. Don't do that. Just let them explore the options, because there's so many options. There's so many options on that campus to find groups and communities that you really align with and that you really feel comfortable with. And the only way to really make that decision consciously is to make it without any input, without any ideas from other people. We already know that you're in this organization and that organization. Like, you don't have to remind your student every single day about that. Like, they get it. But you know, there's other things that are out there that they could pursue that they may feel more comfortable with. And there's organizations that may help them get out of dealing with imposter syndrome or depression or anxiety and things like that. So definitely allow them to make those decisions on their own. And the last one suggestion I have is around grades. Me, freshman year, I was conscious enough to not sign the paperwork that allowed parents access to the grading system. I was like, that's not something that they need to know about. Like, you know, I'm gonna pass the class and I'm gonna get the degree. That's all they need to know. But if you do have access to your students' grades and you notice that they start slipping just really randomly, don't, you know, call and say, hey, what's going on? Like, you're slacking in this class, you need to, you know, keep it up, or, you know, we're gonna send you home, or you're gonna have to transfer if you can't get it together, if you're too distracted, because there's so many things that can contribute to that. Depending on what they're studying, sometimes it's the professor. I mean, honestly, most of the times it could be the professor. But other times they could just be dealing with imposter syndrome. They could be dealing with anxiety. They could be dealing with depression. And I think the way to really recognize that and notice it early on is just by having conversations with them. If you notice that every time you call your student, they're still in their dorm, sitting on the bed, they may be dealing with something. If every time you call your student and they're headed to a party, they also may be dealing with something. I think, you know, when you notice your student is, you know, sometimes in their dorm, or sometimes in the cafeteria, or sometimes they're on their way to class, or sometimes they're going to hang out with their friends, like, that's kind of a healthier balance. And you can kind of see, like, okay, like, they're managing things, like, they're good, they're happy, they're comfortable. But if you notice that they're repeating the same things over and over again, they could be dealing with something and trying to find other ways to, like, kind of silence it or muffle it. But yeah, I think regardless of what the situation is, just having consistent conversation with them. And we don't want to be on the phone all the time. So, you know, like text messages, you know, just checking on them. What are you up to? What you got going on today? Are you hanging out with your friends today? Did you already eat? Especially checking in if they ate. That's a big thing. A lot of us forget to eat all the time, especially if we're dealing with things, because we feel so overwhelmed to the point where, like, I know there was times where I was in my dorm just working like for hours, just like trying to get as much work done as possible. And then it was 10 o'clock at night and I hadn't eaten anything since 1. And it's like, oh shoot, I have to find, you know, something to eat. And so that indicates that they may be dealing with something as well, because honestly, college students who are good, they don't forget to eat. They know when the cafeteria open and when it closed, and they know when there's certain meals on certain days. They know the whole lunch menu. So when they're not eating on time, or they're not eating as frequently as they should, that could be an issue as well. But yeah, I think That's pretty much the most advice I can give. Maybe if I had a child, I could, give a little bit more, but that's all I got for now.
Well, that's good. I mean, that's really good advice, to help our parents, because I've had conversations with parents over the past 2 weeks. Most recently, a parent a couple of days ago who was really stressed out about what was happening with her daughter on campus, not Howard's campus, but another campus in central Pennsylvania, and her like really getting to a point where she was feeling like she wasn't even worthy of living, and it was getting really serious. And just being able, and as a parent, when you're that far away from your kid, it makes it hard because you can't just grab them, you can't fix it for them. um and so just being a listening ear and not feeling like when your kid is calling that they need you to resolve the issue. And so one of the things that I find myself asking now, after reading Dare to Lead by Brene Brown, like, don't try to fix it. Like, ask the question, how do you want me to show up for you? How do you want me to support you? What do you need me to do in this space? Do you need me just to be silent? Do you need me to come get you? Do you need me to fight for you? Because my, daughter know, like, I'm, as soon as she tells me something, I'm ready to, I'm like, what, who said what? Right. And so sometimes you just need to calm down because your high energy may make it worse for your bison. And so, uh, great advice, support your bison, listen, don't jump to resolving the problem, but be, cognizant of what's going on, ask a lot of questions. If you're able to visit the campus, and if you can't visit the campus, try to find a circle of other parents that might visit the campus and check on your bison for you. We have an amazing network of 2,400 parents in our Parent Connect page, and someone lives close to that campus that would be willing to go check on your bison and, have a conversation with them and take them to lunch. I'm going to open this space right now for the next couple of minutes if parents have questions for Domonique. Does anyone have any questions that they want to ask? You can take your camera off, put your camera on and unmute. Or if you feel more comfortable, just drop in a question in the chat box.
I don't really have any questions, but I would like to say thank you for putting this on. It was very insightful.
Awesome. Thank you, Tara. I appreciate you. Awesome. Noah said, forgot what year so Dominique graduated with the class of 2021. So just last year. Any other questions? So while you guys thinking, or if you're thinking about a question, I do want to share once again, The Dip by Seth Gordon is a book that was given to me when I was in a doctoral program because I was ready to quit. I was over it. I think I was experiencing a little bit of imposter syndrome because, I was in Texas for the first time. I didn't have any family there, no one, no friends, nothing. And I started the doctoral program within a month of relocating to Texas. And all of my classmates in my cohort were either higher education administrators or K through 12 administrators. And it was just me, the community advocate. And I felt like an imposter for a while. And I had to figure out how to navigate that space. And I figured it out. But one of the books that was given to me was called The Dip, because there was some space and time during that journey that I just felt like I can't. I need to back out of it, and the book really helped me to reorganize my thoughts and really, get focused. And so I can think about, like, is this the time to quit? Do I just need to step back for a moment? What's happening? And really normalizing the conversation about checking in and checking out. And it's okay from a professional and an academic lens, or even in relationships. Sometimes you just got to back out of it. Sometimes we're so up close and personal with it that we can't see the full picture. So Seth Gordon's book, The Dip, was very helpful for me. And a new book that is a fairly inexpensive book you can find on Amazon.com is called The Imposter Cure: How to Stop Feeling Like a Fraud and Escape the Mind Trap of Imposter Syndrome. It is available on Amazon.com for $5.99. We don't often find amazing books like that cheap. So please check that book out. That book is written by Dr. Jessamy, I think, Hibbend, Jessamy Hibbend. So please check out that literature, share it with your Bison, read it yourself. If you feel like it's best for you to read it first so that you can, navigate the conversation, please do so. And thank you guys. If you don't have any additional questions, this is recorded. I'm going to have this uploaded to our Howard Parent Connect page. Hopefully we'll continue to have conversations like this, and I'll invite you to share topics that you want us to bring to you as members of Howard Parent Connect. And Domonique Luanda sent a message to thank you. It's much needed discussion, and that you are a remarkable person.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate you for coming through.
Awesome. Well, thank you, ladies, for giving us your Sunday afternoon. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. And I will look forward to seeing you guys on Zoom soon.